Understanding Machine Learning with Jen Looper.
So I have these excessively civilized slides here, and we're just going to go through these, and I'm going to talk a little bit about one of my very favorite poets, who maybe you all remember from high school and college English classes. I hope I'm not triggering you too much with this, but let's just take ourselves back in the day. And I'd like to introduce myself before I continue. So my name is Jen Looper. I'm a cloud advocate lead at Microsoft. I'm the founder and CEO of Vue Vixens. In the Vue community, we are the ones who are kind of standing up for diversity. And if you're interested in taking a look at what we're doing, we're always available at Vue Vixens on Twitter and viewvixens.org. And I myself am on Twitter at Jen Looper. So many Twitter accounts. I have at least 5. Cool. Okay. So today we're going to go back, and I'd like you to think a little bit about the cool old technologies. I think Brian will resonate here with the flashback conf. But the cool old technologies that still resonate with us today. Maybe we remember enjoying these when we were growing up, and the cool old, poetry, the old literature that we used to really enjoy back in the day. Now, there are some really interesting new projects that are trying to help people bring this old technology into the new world. One of these was built by my colleague, actually, Emily Dickinson, and she wrote this really cool mobile app that allows you to learn how to do Morse code. And I believe she hooked it up to an actual Morse device so that you can be tapping code. She does things with between mobile and the physical device as well. Learning how to do old things, but with a really modern mobile app with an awesome interface. There's also Huji. I don't know if my daughter actually likes this. It allows you to create sort of really old looking photos with a lot of lens flare on your iPhone. It's a little mobile app. So this is a fun thing. And I don't know if you know that Tom Hanks is obsessed with typewriters. So he created the Hanks writer, and you can turn your iPhone into an old school typewriter, and it has that kind of clicky feel. So there are a lot of these interesting initiatives to bring old things into the new. And that is the kind of thing I would like to talk about today. I would like to talk about how we can use technology and art together. We can use technology, of course, to preserve art, to remind ourselves of how old things are still relevant today. We can use technology to better understand artistic endeavors, to look at a text in new ways, or look at a piece of a painting or a sculpture in new ways using technology. And you can also use technology to create new types of art. So let's talk a little bit about those 3 pillars. So in terms of preservation, of course, there's the standard curation. We're using technology to preserve old documents that are crumbling in libraries, but mobile apps are also being used to kind of preserve and introduce these old texts to new audiences. There tend to be a lot of mobile apps focused on Shakespeare. I don't know if it has to do with copyright, or perhaps it has to do with college requirements, but the Folger Library has a pretty decent iPad app for Shakespeare. That's really nice. So we're kind of preserving the knowledge of our cultural heritage in these new mobile apps. We're also able to understand and appreciate really old texts. This project blew me away, actually, and kind of changed my whole focus career-wise. In the last Google I/O, there was this fantastic presentation by folks who are working with the Vatican Library, and they are using TensorFlow to decipher these ancient codexes. So in the Vatican Library, there's something called the secret archives. It's not Illuminati or any of that stuff. It's just books that nobody has been able to get to yet because they're buried in 85 kilometers of shelving. The problem is you can't do OCR on this type of document. You can't just scan it like you could, with a scanner on your iPhone, because the handwriting is different than what we're used to. It's certainly not TypeScript. It's not typed. So they have to use something to figure out how to read these old documents. And they use TensorFlow to actually read and scan ancient manuscripts, medieval manuscripts in the Vatican Library. This blew me away. I was so excited by this. So take a look at that project revealed at Google I/O. It's also featured on TensorFlow's homepage. And then this idea of creating new art, this is really cool. These were actually paintings that were generated by a recurrent neural network. They're not terrible. Some of the stuff that you've seen are just mashups of 2 or 3 paintings, and they look just kind of dreadful. It's nothing that you would want to stick on your wall. Personally, I wouldn't hate having these in my on my wall. I don't know. It's not so bad. So I think that, we're getting to a point where we can create believable art completely fresh by means of neural networks. And this is both good and bad, of course. I don't know what it's going to do to the artistic community. I don't think machine-generated art will ever truly replace handmade craftsmanship. But it's something that I think people ought to be aware of. That's a possibility. There's a project to create neural network generated music. I'm not remembering the startup that's doing this, but they were creating soundtracks for movies via neural network, and it wasn't horrible. It was actually listenable. So, I think that this is one of those situations where, yes, professions are going to change, but maybe they can also be enhanced for the better. So what if we are able to do all three of those three pillars that I just talked about in one mobile app? Wouldn't that be amazing? So we can preserve the works of a great poet and introduce them to a new audience, like that Shakespeare app was doing. We can enhance our appreciation of the works by connecting them to our own personal life. And we can create new art in the style of the old using these recurrent neural networks, these new techniques to challenge, and this sort of work actually helps us challenge presumptions about an artist's work. So let's see how far we can get today to completely rethink this great American poet, Emily Dickinson. And let's have a virtual show of hands. I'm not going to look at the chat. Yes, I am. I'm really curious. How many Emily fans? Yes. Okay. Put your hand up in the chat room if you like Emily Dickinson. I love Emily Dickinson. She cracks me up, but also she's just such a savage. She's amazing. And also she's my neighbor. I'm in Boston, and she was based in Amherst, which is not too far, a couple hours away in western Massachusetts. So let's build an app. Let's build the greatest literary app to celebrate Emily Dickinson. A little background about Miss Emily. She was active from 1830 to 1886, reasonably long-lived. She was based in Amherst, Massachusetts. I believe her house is still there and you can visit it. She had this reputation for being really eccentric. At one point, I think she was only dressing in white, and at some point she was so timid that she would receive visitors who came to admire her poetry and her garden, but she would only talk to them through closed doors. So she was a character. She was known as a recluse. And in her, reclusive moments, she wrote 1,800 poems. So she was very, very prolific. But she was actually known in her lifetime for being actually an avid gardener. This is also Beatrix Potter, same thing. We know her for the literature, but back in their day, they were known as having amazing gardens. So here we are. And if you ask someone like my daughter, for example, what about Emily Dickinson? What do you think about Emily Dickinson? The word that you might get back is that, oh, she's really dark. She's just really gloomy. This is the one meme that comes up on Giphy if you search for Emily Dickinson. I like it a lot. But we have a lot of idées reçues, so received ideas about Emily Dickinson. Yes, recluse. Yes, maybe she was bipolar. It's very risky to try to diagnose from our current knowledge of medicine what was going on back 100 years ago, but some people say she may have had some kind of a bipolar disorder. She probably had some kind of mood swings, but don't we all, right? She just wrote them down. But I think it's kind of interesting that according to the data, she probably had some kind of severe seasonal affective disorder. Listen, in western Massachusetts, I don't blame her. But she wrote poems such as these, and people have figured out that she's writing her more cheerful poems in the summer and her more gloomy poems in the winter. I don't blame her at all. But here is an example of a poem that she wrote in spring. Inebriate of air am I, and debauchee of dew, reeling through endless summer days from inns of molten blue. That is so stunning. Inns of molten blue, so the sky. And then she would turn around in the winter and write something like this. I wonder if it hurts to live, and if they have to try, and whether, could they choose between, it would not be to die. So I love it. It's spectacular. She lived her life to the fullest, I think, even from behind closed doors. So there are other received ideas about Emily. Another one is that she perfected the concept of slant rhyme in that the vowels or the consonants differ and they contrast to create a perfect rhyme where vowels match. So just to clarify what I just said, so that in slant rhyme, your vowels and consonants are differing. and it's contrasted to perfect rhyme where the vowels match. So a good example of slant rhyme would be something like this. This is her most famous poem. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. So soul and all, that's slant rhyme. The vowels are mismatched, but I believe she used this technique to really embrace the English language and push it. She's doing something that's a little bit interesting, and it really catches your attention and makes you think a lot. I really like it a lot. It's a very beautiful art form. Okay, so she's the master of slant rhyme. She's also the master, and this is the thing that I remember from my classes in Emily Dickinson, is that she wrote with a hymn or a ballad meter, which always corresponds to the Battle Hymn of the Republic. So, because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves in immortalities. You can sing every single one of Emily Dickinson's poems to the Battle Hymn of the Republic. So it'd be something like this. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves in immortality. It's hilarious. So I challenge you to go and check her poems out and sing them to the Battle Hymn of the Republic. But she has this very clear rhyme that is, it's really typical of her poetry. Perhaps she used this ballad and then worked with slant rhyme. The second one is a good example of slant rhyme. He slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too, for his civility. So away and civility, slant rhyme. Good stuff. Okay, so enough taking you back to your trauma of hanging out in English class with fanatics like me of old stuff. Let's talk about how a modern multimedia presentation can aid in your understanding and appreciation of old texts. I hope you're ready to reevaluate these grade school idées reçues with a mobile app. So I like to build mobile apps. I've built them for a long time. I look at them as software snacks and a way to kind of explore ideas and to kind of make concepts. And it's cool because you can kind of leverage hardware capabilities to personalize the experience. You can use your accelerometer to shake your phone and things will happen. You can, take selfies, you can record audio, you can play audio very, very easily. You can do a lot of this stuff on the web, but I challenge you to use the accelerometer on that laptop. Actually, don't do it. So good stuff that we can do with our mobile apps. So, okay, great. Let's go ahead and build a mobile app to showcase Emily Dickinson's poetry. So what I did is I created this mobile app with 4 screens. The first one is a very basic poem of the day. Second is a mood matcher. The third one is a selfie matcher. And the fourth page is actually AI generated poetry. So we're going to start exploring with the new stuff here. So we're going to take something from basic, personalize it even more with a little machine learning behind it. And then we're going to just dive into this concept of generating poetry and see what happens. It gets exciting. Okay. So what tools can we use to build such a mobile app? Well, my kind of stack of choice is NativeScript plus Vue.js. Together, it's NativeScript Vue. It's an open source, free to try, free to use, nativescript-vue.org. A really nice way if you're a Vue developer to just jump into mobile dev. It's very similar to working with Vue on the web, but you're building a native mobile app. This is really pretty sweet. Another piece of the stack is my use of Microsoft Cognitive Services. So cognitive services are kind of astonishing. There's a ton of them. We're always releasing new stuff. And with cognitive services, you're able to build intelligent algorithms into your apps, websites, and bots so that they can see, hear, speak, and understand your user needs through natural methods of communication. So we've got a lot going on with natural language processing, with audio processing, with image recognition, using pre-trained models. So when you just need some basic use of machine learning that's accessible and able to use stuff through API calls, cognitive services might be your pony to ride because it works beautifully and it's quite solid. I also used Azure machine learning, specifically Azure notebooks. It looks like this. Let me flip over. So these are my project on Azure notebooks, and it's a way. Yes, there's a cocktail generator there. It's a way to leverage the firepower of machine learning in the cloud, so that you're not running the stuff on your own servers. and burning through your MacBook Pro really quick. Whenever I run TensorFlow on my MacBook Pro, the thing just gets really hot and starts sounding like an F-14, and it's pretty exciting. So I go ahead and use notebooks on Azure in the cloud to just run experiments. Try this neural network, or try to analyze data, even just your basic data science needs. Very easy to use. Okay. So what you're going to need to do when you get started with NativeScript Vue is you're going to have the CLI installed. You need Xcode and Android Studio if you're going to be developing for iOS and Android together. So you need those two things. You need your CLI installed. And then you just go ahead and do TNS, which is Telerik NativeScript. TNS create, and my app's name is Emily. You get the joke with the M and the L. I hope you all got the joke. I sometimes have to explain my jokes because they're that bad. But anyway, okay, so here we are. We're going to scaffold our Vue.js app in NativeScript, and then it's going to do a lot of installations. And eventually it will run and create a very basic mobile app, which you can run on Android and iOS emulators or on device if you like. And it looks like this. You can actually use Preview. It'll give you a QR code like this, and it'll scaffold you a really basic Vue.js app. It has Sass installed by default. I always rip it out. Just FYI, those are 3 files I don't want. But it's a very standard markup for the Vue developer. You see that you have some imports here. You're going to import Vue not from Vue, but you import Vue from NativeScript Vue, and then you just launch in your frame your home component and just start your app. So that is how your app is going to get started, and that's app.js. So then you have to figure out, make sure I didn't skip something, right. So then you have to figure out where you're going to source your data. This is always the biggest question for any data scientist or anybody working with machine learning. Where the heck am I going to get my data from? Because you need a quality data set to build anything meaningful. So for me, I got a little bit lucky and I went to the PoetryDB. So poetrydb.org has a decent amount of not very well-known Emily Dickinson poetry already input. There are about 300 plus poems. And I just went in there, input Emily Dickinson, and just scraped everything they had into a JSON file. So that was actually really convenient. So if you want to work with poetry, try the PoetryDB. And then I went ahead and set up my layout. So I wanted 4 pages. I want them in tabs so that I can easily access them. You could also use like a drawer, but I kind of like to have my navigation out in the open. And I also like to build my own tab navigators because the native tab navs are weird. On Android, they're at the top, and on iOS, they're at the bottom, and I don't like that. So I always like to style them pretty. So I always make my own. So here I have this grid layout right here. Let's see if I can highlight it. This is the grid layout, which is a stack layout with a bunch of images, and that is the actual, those are the buttons that you're tapping. And you're changing your current component in this component right here. Those are all going to be on top of each other. So once they're all loaded, sort of like lazy loading, those will always be available, and you're just going to be flipping back and forth between your components. So it's a nice way to build a relatively simple app. So these are the loadable pages that I'm building. This is the script of that file. And I go ahead and import my pages, and then I'm able to click and change the page that's being shown. So that is how that works. And all of this code is open source, and you can get a copy of it or take a look at it if you like. And then here is my secret to you. If you're not the greatest designer in the world, which I am not, I actually have gotten really far with just a little bit of CSS. Like I rip out all the Sass, and I just have a standard CSS file that works cross-platform. And my secret is to give your page a very gentle linear gradient to make it look stylish. Pick a nice font. So I picked Josephine at a decent size. And then I build usually in cards, and I give a nice border radius and a nice margin. So gradient, nice font, border radius, you're off to the races. This is my secret to you. I also accept unmarked 20s and 50s for that secret. So here we are. Okay, so the next thing you want to do once you've got your styles all set is you're going to start building out that first page, which is how to show a daily poem. So I use a Vuex, which is a little bit like, I want to say Redux in React. So it is the state management library for Vue. And I always want my poem to be available no matter what page I'm on. So I just store it in Vuex. And So then all I have to do here in the script is I import map actions and map state from Vuex, and then I just grab that poem and display it. And when the page is created, I just grab the poem, the skip poem, which is looking at this guy in Vuex. So it's just displaying, this is really simple. It's just displaying a poem in a label with a text wrap. So that's it. So you have your binding here and just display that poem. Just a bit of text. So here is the result. This is the icon. This is the splash screen. Oh, by the way, I like Procreate and Apple Pencil as well. And also a little makeup really improves Emily. So just good fun. Anyway, okay, so this is the way the styling ended up looking. So you can see the rounded borders and the cards and the nice font and the gradient and the buttons at the bottom. So here on my first tab, we have my daily poem, and that's just pulling right out of Vuex, and here we are. So that's very simple. It's a bit easy, right? It's just pulling a piece of data out of something that's stored in a text file. It's nothing revolutionary, but at least it gets us started. Okay, so at that point, you know you want to build an app, you've got your data, you've got it in the poem, sorry, in the app in JSON. What if you want to start analyzing this and figure out a little bit more about Emily Dickinson? Well, I took all of those poems and flattened these out into a text file, which was always fun when you're flattening from JSON to text, but there's some services that help you do that. And you can start using data science to analyze this poetry. So what I did here, back to my Azure notebooks, you see I have my lyric and poetry text mining notebook here, which is actually running right now. I'm not going to show it to you yet. It's just a little bit of Python running here. So what I'm doing here is I'm stripping out the stop words right here on this line here. So you can strip out stop words such as a, and the. Get rid of that stuff because that's definitely going to be the most used words. And strip that stuff out and then figure out and rank which words are most common in this body of work that we're analyzing. So just a little data science goes a long way towards understanding a little bit better what kind of vocabulary she's using, at least in this data set, and remember how we thought that her poetry is very dark? Maybe her most common word is something like death, destruction, I don't know. So I'm curious here in the chat room, if you want to write what you think her most common word is. Sorry, this is small. It's I'll show you the code here. This is actually the code right here. This is my text mining. So if you can figure out what her most common word is by guess, this is actually her most common word that she uses, and she uses the word like the most in all of this data set. It's quite interesting. You would think that it would be something darker, but notice that death occurs right here. But before death comes heaven and summer and life and sea. And then right after death, we have sun, nature, time, sea, God, flower. So honestly, and night is like way back here. So it's quite a great exercise to sort of educate yourself as you're building using a little bit of data science. I've run the Beatles corpus through this thing too. It's quite amusing. Guess what their most common word is? It's love. Love, love, love. So anyway, this is a very useful little exercise, and it'll help you. This kind of text mining will help you as you're building your mobile app, because you'll have an idea of how to present her poetry. So the conclusion that all this text mining brought me to is that her poetry is not all doom and gloom. Great. With that knowledge, we can start building out the next screens. We can start making this personal. Obviously, she has a large range of emotion happening, as we've seen with these words, quite a large range of human experience. Why don't we go ahead and start building a mobile app that will allow us to relate our own emotional range with that which we find in her poetry. So I created in screen number 2, the Emily mood slider. So here I hooked up the cognitive services text sentiment analysis, which is horribly misused. Text sentiment analysis service is supposed to be used for things like product reviews so that you can see whether your customers hate your stuff. So I just decided, heck, let's go ahead and run 300 Emily Dickinson poems through this service and see what happens in terms of, what sentiments are picked up. So here's that famous poem, and you can try this yourself if you go to this page here. It's the text, it's in Cognitive Services Text Analytics. You can go ahead and run phrases through here. If you change this word to dreadful, it'll analyze it way more negatively. Well, a little bit more negatively. So very interesting to run poetry through this thing. And it doesn't have to be English language either. It has a lot of languages supported. So the general sentiment of this particular poem, which is actually really beautiful, is at 80% positive. And overall, her poetry actually mapped a little bit more positive than negative. It's certainly not neutral. It's a little bit more positive. It's quite interesting exercise. So go ahead and use your cognitive services and see what happens here. Run something random through this thing. This is your homework for today. See what happens. Okay, so great. So if you want to go ahead and try this with code, you can use an Azure function if you want to, and just create a request that calls cognitive services via an API call and get some response back. So here you can even set the language. You can set it to Spanish here and get a sentiment back. So that is one thing you can do. For my needs, I needed to first pre-process my poetry because these poems are not changing. So this is not a use case where customers are coming at me and inputting things on the fly and I have to analyze it quickly. For my use case, I have a standard classic corpus of poetry with a bunch of words that I can get the sentiment to and just paste that into this JSON file that I'm working with. So this is clearly pretty negative. So give me back to death. The death I never feared, except that it deprived of thee, oh boy. That's not so cheerful. But the second one, of course, success is counted sweetest by those who ne'er succeed. To comprehend a nectar requires sorest need. It's actually not super cheerful, but it came back as pretty positive, probably distant strains of triumph. I'll bet you the service keyed on triumph and got pretty excited. So yeah, cognitive services is like, yes, positive. Great. Okay, so we have pre-processed our stuff, our poems. This is how you would build a slider. This is one of NativeScript's modules. It's the slider module, and it allows you to build a basic slider with a little bit of styling that you have some control over. And I'm just watching for the change of value. So as I slide it up and down, I'm going to ask ViewX, again with map actions, get mood poem. So I'm going to get the mood poem according to whatever's being passed through, and then clearing the mood poem as I keep sliding, as I keep going. So let's see how that is going to work. Here is time for an actual demo. So I hope you can all see the screen as I do not show you all my texts. Let's see, so the Emily app's here. Okay, so this is the poem of the day, actually. Oh boy. Pain has but one acquaintance, and that is death. Golly. Mercury must still be in retrograde. Okay, here we are. So back to the mood slider. So here is a pretty negative one. And what I did is I also created a little color. Let me get a very positive one. Very nice. Summer begins to have the look, pursuer of enchanting book, reluctantly but sure perceives the gain upon the backward leaves. Good stuff. Actually, this is a beautiful poem. Autumn begins to be inferred by millinery of the cloud, or deeper color in the shawl that wraps the everlasting hill. I mean, this girl, she has a way with words. Let's find something gloomy. Nature can do no more. She has fulfilled her dyes. Whatever flower fail to come of other summer days. Oh, this lamp rhyme. Yeah. Nature's imposing negative nulls opportunity. Oy vey. Okay, let's go back. Super. Okay. So With this slider, we're able to, have a nice mobile experience. Actually, it's in the scroll view, so you can get your mood, match your mood to a poem that matches in terms of cheerfulness. That's fun. All right, a little bit more interesting. Great. Onwards and upwards. Let's do something even more, because you could do this on the web, right? Let's talk about things that where it's really helpful to have a mobile app in your hands, because you could be walking along the street and thinking, I really need to pick me up. I'm going to open the Emily app and I'm going to go ahead and take a selfie. Wow, that's a gloomy selfie. We'll redo that selfie. So the selfie analyzer will match your mood according to your facial expression to the sentiment of a poem. So let's see how this is going to work. You can always test this out on the web as well. This is also in cognitive services. It's the Face API, and it looks for emotion, and it'll give you back the level of anger, contempt, disgust, fear, happiness, neutral, sadness, or surprise that you're feeling. So, I mean, you can use this stuff for nefarious reasons, but I like to use it for art. So let's do that. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a pic. And, oops, I just lost my cell phone. Okay. Let me go ahead and get moving again with this thing. Okay. Okay, so here is the stack layout where I'm going to have a button so that I can take a picture and run a face detection script. So, and the image is going to be here. It's going to be stored right there. And then we're going to have the emotions listed here that's going to come back from the service. So here I run an async function to run face detect. And I'm going to take the picture and then call the API. So it looks like this. I have my API key here. I just stripped it out for this demo, but I'm just going to go ahead and send the request, query the API, and then grab the emotions that are coming back and equate that to the poem score. And then I'm going to use those pre-processed poems to match my selfie mood. So we're going to match the result with the poem sentiment. And so here's where we get our selfie poem. And we are going to commit to Vuex, the display, and get the selected poem from here. So take a pic, query the API, get a result back, match it to a poem. That's the process. All right, demo time. I'm just going to clear that awful selfie so nobody has to look at that because that was crazy. All right, let's see. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take a pic. So I'm going to have a happy, cheerful pic. Great. Okay. Aha, it came back 100% happy. And then my poem is matched. Then heaven more remote, for heaven is the root. But these the flitted seed, more flown indeed than ones that never were, or those that hide and are. Well, we have to think about this one. Let's try a really sad. Let's try to get a sad poem. Yeah, came back as actually neutral. So this is my neutral poem that comes back. Not at home to callers, says the naked tree. Bonnet due in April, wishing you a good day. So I'll have to be much sadder to get an actual sad poem. Contempt, anger, and disgust. So we need a paid professional actor to do this. But anyway, that's the concept. Go ahead and you can certainly play with your API and see what kind of poems come back. Good fun. All right. Now we're getting into interesting things. We're leveraging our mobile apps, we're leveraging the hardware capabilities, and we're starting to have some nice results. Okay, so here's where everything gets weird. Let me go back to our daily poem. Cheerful daily poem. Okay, so this is a dog flower. These are mashups that were created by our current neural network that was looking at pictures of flowers and dogs and decided to mash them up together. So there's a lot of weird stuff on the internet right now because people are having a lot of fun with the recurrent neural networks. So they're generating text, they're generating images, they're generating music with this stuff. And I think this is an opportunity for us. So this is something that I like to talk about I have this in a lot of slides, but this is coming from aiweirdness.com. You can go visit it. And the lady who runs AI Weirdness, Janelle Shane, she does experiments with all kinds of data. So she had, I think, 7th graders collect as many ice cream flavors as they could, and then asked a neural network to generate new flavors. So this is what it generated: mango cats, brown crunch, strawberry cream disease. So there's a lot of really weird stuff going on. But she also ran knitting and crochet patterns. Actually, I think this is all knitting patterns through a neural network as well. And then asked people to create in the actual yarn the patterns that were generated. And it's so creepy and hilarious. There's just such a lot of weird stuff out there. And I think that it's not like to freak people out. It's kind of created to inspire, I think. It can inspire you to be more creative. So I wanted to see what would happen if I ran a whole bunch of Emily Dickinson poetry through this type of network. And I tried a couple of different techniques. The first test I did was using a neural network with Markov chains with a little help from Kaggle. If you go to Kaggle, you'll find these kind of experiments, and you'll find my data set as well on Kaggle. So with Markov chains are kind of cool. What they do is that they're used to build new sentences based off word 1 to word 2 probabilities. So it scans through your data set and figures out what's the probability of this word following that word, and looking for patterns, and doing it over and over again in the neural network to predict the properties of the next poem. So Markov chains are one thing, and then I honestly did not have a great experience with that technique, because the one I tend to use a little bit more is this project called TextGenRNN, which is by Max Wolf, who I think is working off someone else's work as well. But this is his GitHub. It's totally worth taking a look at. The great thing about TextGenRNN, and this is also used by Janelle Shane, it comes with a pre-trained model. I believe he's pre-trained on Trump's tweets. He's also trained on Shakespeare, like all of Shakespeare's stuff. And also on Reddit reactions. So what you can do with this project is that with this pre-trained model, you can retrain the last few layers of the neural network on your own text. So it's basically transfer learning. And it works pretty well. What it does is it takes an input of up to 40 characters, converts each character to a vector, and feeds those into a recurrent layer, takes the output, feeds that into yet another layer, and then all 3 layers are then fed into what is called an attention layer to weight the most important features and average them together. Take that output and map it to probabilities that they're the next character in the sequence. So there's a lot of processing going on here. If you run it on your local, it takes a little while. You can run it in the cloud though, and that is actually probably a good idea. So in my notebooks here, like this one, this is the Emily generator. And this is using TextGenRNN here. So you just do a pip install TextGenRNN and then just go ahead and use it using TensorFlow backend. So you can certainly run this stuff in the cloud and save yourself some agony. Okay, so great, we did that. So you can run these poems through algorithms to generate new poetry. So this one is using the Markov generator. So this is using RNN Markov. And this is what was produced. Yet do I not take it from a summer's day, the interdicted land by a settler, that signalized a show's retreat was good, his whore delights by parties, also that I could take the pumpkins in. It makes absolutely no sense. It is not good. I have to say, this is not good. Although I kind of like peace by the simple lid, thy flower be a perfume. That's actually kind of pretty. It sounds very Emily, but it doesn't make any kind of sense. So using that project that I just showed you, with TextGenRNN, because you are doing transfer learning, and it already has been looking at texts and how English language actually works, it generates poetry that's not horrible. So it generates something like this. A few and the sun, I hear her each life should be, never had a bird at lost, memory and I withheld invincibly. And it's actually trying to rhyme, I think. I hear her each life should be, withheld invincibly. It's trying to get the meter and the rhyme. It's fascinating. I was actually a little bit impressed. So I would say that Emily's in trouble or her heritage is in trouble, but it's really fun to think that maybe we could revive some of this great corpus of old poetry and make it new, maybe a little bit with these kind of neural networks. Okay, so I'm just going to show you. Let's see. I have not looked today. This is a pretty good one. So what I did is I generated a whole bunch of fake poems and then imported them into JSON. Here's one that's generated, a few in the boys and girls, but how he said, 'twas such quick, the kind of memory, and as the birds surpass, he touched them to dance, her glass is the little child. Okay, it doesn't make much sense either, but it's not horrible. It's got some pieces of logic that might have helped someone like Emily Dickinson if she ever gets tired of writing her stuff, maybe her memory could have gotten jogged by using a neural network. I always think that, so I did the same exercise with the Beatles, and I always think that those guys were literally getting burnt out because they were trying to tour and write new poetry or new lyrics all the time. And I think they would have been helped by a neural network because they could have just gotten some lyrics that would have worked well enough considering their stuff is not nearly as sophisticated. So just a thought. So my question is this the future of poetry? I don't think so. I wouldn't worry too much, but I had some interesting reactions to a tweet. So I ran 300 Emily Dickinson's poems through a TextGen RNN, and here's a poem that was produced, which is not terrible. And then the answer I got, so a TextGen RNN of Emily Dickinson is basically E.E. Cummings, which is dead on. That is absolutely right. Because E.E. Cummings was trying to kind of dismantle and almost make Markov chains of the English language. If you look at his poetry, it's bits and pieces and snippets, and it's a lot about structure and not a lot about deeper meanings, I don't think. So it's just more and more abstract, kind of like the art that we saw. The good art that's created by neural networks tends to be extremely abstract. And that's kind of the way that art goes. It gets more and more abstract. Think of the history of art, of painting, of poetry, of modern music, how it gets just more and more abstract and less structural. So I think that neural networks are mimicking our brains, which is what they're designed to do. And maybe the future is basically a much more abstract world. I don't know if that's a good thing, but that's where these techniques are taking us. Okay, so to summarize, new technologies can revive old things, and they can help you reevaluate your received ideas about literature. They can rekindle your interest in learning more about it. They can help you rethink your creative process or become inspired to kickstart your creative process. Maybe a generated piece of music would give you a snippet of a melody that then you could build on it and make into something spectacular. So I want to encourage you to play with these new techniques and see what you can do with them. I'm super curious to see what you'll build. Emily says thank you. I say thank you, and you can always visit this project on GitHub. It's all open sourced. Here's a QR code for you to make it really easy, speaking of new technologies.
Thanks for watching.